It's essentially a pyramid
Yeah.
that has this property. Taken through the river.
Yeah.
So now here we are.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's city council meeting. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilperson Baena?
Present.
Councilperson Kazarian?
Present.
Councilperson Pereiro?
Present.
Councilperson Rivas Lugo?
Present.
Councilperson Rosado Martinez? Absent. Councilperson Velez Garcia? Absent. Council President Frey?
Present. All please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item on the agenda is number 3, public comment.
We open public comment. Hearing none, seeing none, public comment is closed.
Next item on the agenda under number 4 is executive communication. Under A is proclamation of the mayor of the city of Central Falls declaring January 20th, 2025, a day celebrating and honoring the life of Dr. Martin Luther King.
So received.
Under number 4B is an executive order 2025-0002, appointment of Tony Lucio Vieira as acting director of Department of Public Works and Code Enforcement for the city of Central Falls.
Also so received. Are you going to speak prior to?
This time I'd like to acknowledge that Councilperson Rosado Martinez has arrived. The time is 6:02.
Good evening,
Good evening, Adam.
Excuse me, Council President. Members of Council, on behalf of the mayor, I'm excited to introduce our candidate for the position of Director of Department of Public Works and Code Enforcement, Tony Vieira. When I last spoke with council on this position, it was in December. And we had requested from council an additional waiver and vote of 90 days as we continued our job search efforts. This is a really important position. The Department of Public Works is the primary way that residents experience their city government in many ways. And so the mayor wanted to make sure that she had all the time that she needed to conduct as thorough a job search as possible. I cited some of the numbers when I was here in December, but just to remind everybody, we received over 30 qualified applicants for this role, had 15 phone interviews with separate individuals, screening interviews, brought in 4 individuals for extensive multiple in-person interviews with both our HR director, myself, and the mayor in different increments. And we're excited that that very disciplined job search effort has produced a candidate as qualified as Tony. His resume is included in your packets, but just a couple of facts that I think are really important and speak to why the mayor made this selection. You know, this is a very technical job in some ways, right? We are doing things at our Department of Public Works, such as plowing the streets in the winter. We are maintaining our parks with very specific sets of equipment. And so at a baseline, we needed to find somebody with the requisite experience. In that sense, we're very fortunate to have found Tony Prior to this position, he was working as the superintendent of parks in East Providence, which essentially means he was the DPW director for their parks there. But given that East Providence is much larger than Central Falls, he was managing a unionized workforce that's nearly, actually over twice the size of our DPW department. He was responsible for plowing snow in winter snow emergencies in East Providence, not just for the public parks, but they would divide East Providence into sectors, and he was responsible for clearing sectors that is itself larger than the city of Central Falls. So we felt very confident from a technical perspective that Tony was qualified for this role. But just as importantly to the mayor was her feeling that Tony understood the human element of the job, that this is in very large part a constituent service role, and also that he was somebody who would listen to the very talented workforce that we already have at DPW. So for those reasons, the mayor is very pleased to put forward for your consideration Tony Vieira, and I would like to make him available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Larry.
Good evening.
Before we begin, I want to thank RJ and all those involved in the process. I know you did your due diligence, and I know you took your time. It wasn't rushed into it. You gave many candidates a fair chance to this position. And Tony's got it. Before I turn it over, I had read your resume. Very impressive. And I like what I saw about the roof terrace. I've been involved in that in Kentucky a little bit. I saw the poem I wrote.
I did.
I'll turn it over to the council members. Any questions for?
I don't have questions, Mr. President, but I have a comment or I say. Tony, welcome to the City Center 4. Thank you for being open for share to our community. As the former Park and Recreation Director, I know the importance for our residents of the quality of life, the good maintenance of the all green areas spaces that we have. I believe in you in your work. I know you can do it, and thank you for sharing to the City Center 4. Welcome. Anything I can help you, assistant to you, I'm here to do that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you. That's my
Anyone else?
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Hi, Tony.
How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Same.
So I just wanted to learn a little bit more about you. We did see the resume, which I agree, impressive. I love. I specifically love that you're a coach because I actually kind of overheard you say, Wilder, and I forgot the little word. So I wondered what sport you coached in East Providence.
Yes, I coached high school soccer for 13 years, and I also coached at Providence College for 2 seasons as well on the
Nice.
women's staff. So I've coached many games at Maycomber, both when it was a not so nice grass field and on the beautiful turf field that you have now. And I played actually in high school on Higginson at the time, which was also a grass field. So I have a lot of history here in Central Falls. 90% of that is driven by soccer, a lot of connections to families. I coached many athletes from Central Falls over the years. So soccer is not only in the city of Central Falls, but in the state of Rhode Island has been a bridge for me to meet a lot of nice people and families across the state. So many of those are from the city of Central Falls, which is one of the reasons why I was intrigued by the job, is I have some history here.
Thank you. That was actually another one of my questions. Like, what if you had any connections? So you already addressed that. I also wanted to hear a little bit more about maybe like some goals or plans for the department, or like how maybe you would tackle your first few days.
Yeah, so I'm a week in now, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the staff down there is incredible. You guys have hit a home run. HR has done an excellent job vetting those individuals, from the clerks in the office, Venus, to the staff in DPW. You have a very solid staff, very knowledgeable, very full of pride for the city of Central Falls. So they've been very welcoming. I would say the first week has gone very well. I think they're eagerly excited to kind of get going in a new direction. Some of the things I spoke about during the interview process was digitalizing the department. I think something that we have to kind of do is not necessarily get away from paper. I think paper is important, but kind of streamline things so that folks like yourself have access to important information at the push of a button. So that's a goal of mine. Probably in the first month or so, I think I'll probably conduct an internal audit of how things are being done. And then after that's completed, of course, with the input of the staff, we'll address some of the concerns that maybe I have or they have, and look to change some things and possibly improve upon some stuff. But they're a well-oiled machine. They do a very nice job. And like I said, the first day was a little overwhelming. I was frustrated because I'm not familiar with the geographical makeup of Central Falls. The majority of my time is spent on High and Broad Street, cutting through Cumberland. So I've been over to the Dexter app side quite a bit now. And after 5 days, I feel like I have a pretty good handle on the geographical piece of Central Falls. And like I said, they've been really good, nothing but positives coming out of that building. And I was at all of the facility. So, people that are involved in getting that facility built deserve a pat on the back because it is one of the best in the state, if not the best in the state. It is in impeccable shape, and the equipment is of high caliber. So
Amazing, you had me actually excited because RJ and I have been talking a lot about, how we can make some of that, the documents and
Yeah.
policies more accessible. So, thank you
you're welcome.
and good luck.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Tony, I just gonna ask you, but I think you already answered the question. If you ever leave the Central Falls, I guess not, right? Very happy to have you be part of the Central Falls team.
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah, I actually lived before I got married, I lived for about 4 years in Lincoln. And the name of the condo association escapes me, but it's right over on the Lincoln Cumberland line. It's the Shoppers over there. My wife had a condo, so we would frequent the area quite a bit. I love Spanish food, even though Portuguese food is delicious. When you're raised on it and you eat it every day, nothing better than Spanish food, that's for sure. So I frequent the area often for the food piece, that's for sure.
Anyone else? It's funny what you said about, this street is, the city's a square mile, but there's a lot of streets.
There are,
A lot of little streets.
Yeah.
And I chuckled because I know a Tony Vieira, but I know that's a very popular Portuguese name. There's probably 10,000.
There were two in the city of East Providence working. It was very confusing. I got his mail, he got my mail. It was, yeah.
Do you speak Portuguese?
I do, yeah. I'm fluent in Portuguese and I speak a little bit of Spanish as well. Yeah.
Awesome.
With that, I'm looking for an approval of the mayor's appointment.
If I may, Councilperson, we were still on the executive order, so we have to go on to item number C, which is the consideration of appointment.
I would make a motion to approve the, sorry.
So item C, with the consideration of appointment by Mayor Maria Rivera, Tony Lucio Vieira, 187 Grassmere Ave, East Providence, as Director of Public Works and Code Enforcement for the City of Central Falls.
I'm sorry, I forgot you have to read the whole thing. Yes, so I make a motion.
Councilwoman Mayor, second by Raphael. Roll call vote.
Councilperson Diana,
Yes.
Councilperson Kazarian,
Yes.
Councilperson Figueroa,
Yes.
Councilperson Rivas Ludo,
Yes.
Councilperson Rosado Martinez,
Yes.
Council President Perry.
Absolutely.
Motion passes 6-0.
Tony, I'm gonna be reaching out to you on some other soccer stuff.
Perfect, yeah. All right, thank you very much.
Congratulations.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate
That's
it.
the good news, Tony. The
Yeah.
bad news is we're expecting 27 inches of snow.
I heard there's some snow coming Wednesday, yeah. Hopefully not 27. I've done that before, Thank you.
No.
Next item on the agenda under 5, new business, is City Council sitting as Board of License Commissioners hearing in consideration of petition of license. We have a constable renewal for Venus Matthias, 66 Carpenter Street, Central Falls.
Just renewal, so they don't have to be here for that.
Correct.
Just to mention that the council's basically a renewal, and I think we never had a problem with constable licenses. No questions? Looking for a motion to approve the renewal?
So move.
Councilman Mayor, take a second. Roll call vote?
Councilperson Diana,
Yes.
Councilperson Kazarian,
Yes.
Councilperson Figueroa,
Yes.
Councilperson Rivas Lugo,
Yes.
Councilperson Rosado Martinez,
Yes.
and Council President Perez.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Next item under new business, City Council sitting with Board of Licensing Commissioners during consideration of petition of licenses is the private detective renewal for Mr. Douglas E. Belkamp of 19 Division Street, North Attleboro.
Again, it don't matter, it's just me.
You know,
Looking for a motion to approve.
Make the motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye.
motion passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda under new business is an entertainment. It's new, Mi Pequeño Salvadoreño Inc., doing business as Mi Pequeño Salvadoreño, 791 Lonsdale Ave. I don't believe there's anyone here to represent the establishment. It is an entertainment license.
Let's look for a motion to table. Motion to table this license at this time. Yeah, motion.
Yes.
Second by Lee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Next
That
item.
I'll say sorry. I said yes. I
You said
believe
you're voting
last
twice? Next item on the agenda, under number 6, is schedule of bills, hearings, and consideration, Appendix A, zoning ordinance for the city of Central Falls is updated and amended from time to time, first reading. Carried by request.
Good evening, Mr. President. Congratulations to all of you on your recent inauguration. I was there. It was very nice. So, I am here tonight. I think most of you probably recognize me. I sometimes sit in Matt's spot. So I work with Darrell Everett. We're a law firm, and I provide solicitor services. I'm actually the town solicitor in Cumberland, and I focus mainly on land use matters. So I'm here not in that capacity, but because of the 2023 state law changes, there were about 14 bills that were passed by the General Assembly with wide-ranging amendments to the State Zoning Enabling Act, most of which are simply items that you have to change in your ordinance to comply with state law. So not a lot of decisions to make on what should be in the zoning ordinance. Most of what I'm gonna talk about tonight is amendments that have to be made in order to comport with state law. So over the last year or so, as the planning board, zoning board was reviewing applications, if the matters were not consistent with the state law, they would have to accept the state law anyway. So this is a project that was funded by Rhode Island Housing. They put out what's called Municipal Technical Assistance Funds, and I'm working with Housing Works Rhode Island as their vendor to provide you with those services to amend your zoning ordinance. We're also amending the planning board subdivision regulations. We expect those to be with Director Vandermillen and Josh Mangone by the end of this week. And then after that, we've worked with RJ and the administration, and we're gonna start on your comprehensive plan. Again, under a separate engagement, but we're really working on land use issues, zoning issues, planning issues right now relative to state law changes, as well as just to get you up to date with your comprehensive plan. In terms of the Housing Works program, so I'm doing all of the zone changes, and then Housing Works is gonna provide some technical assistance to train the zoning and planning boards and potentially the city council on some of these issues so that you can actually implement them properly. So as I said, in many cases, the state law trumps, so there's really no choices for you to make. I will identify a couple of things that the planning staff and the planning board have recommended, and those are discretionary. So we'll talk about those couple of things when we get to them. A little bit of a housekeeping matter. When this was published for a public hearing, The original zoning ordinance was published, so by law, you can amend during this public hearing, which is what we're doing tonight. So what I'm gonna ask for is a motion to accept the version in front of you tonight as an amended version. And what we're requesting that you do, instead of what I call a red line version with the cross-offs and the underlines, it gets very confusing because there was so much moving around. We're repealing the existing zoning ordinance and we're simply replacing it with the document in front of you. There are a couple of changes that we made, frankly, over the weekend. My engagement was to incorporate 2023 state law. However, as we were working with Jim and Josh, you know, minor changes that might not have been made previously that we realized should be made, we also incorporated those. So, for example, on page 70, earlier, you know, probably 2022, 2021, the state law changed that zoning board members the zoning board only needed a quorum of 4 instead of 5, so we made that change. A majority of those sitting make a decision for approval rather than 3 out of 5. So, I mean, if you have 4, it's gonna be 3 anyway. But the quorum is 4, you still have your 2 alternates, things like that. So that was just a change that Jim had brought to our attention that was a prior state law change that we agreed to change for you. And we did that in a couple of instances. So the other thing, I just want to go over a couple of points with the new law that you know, may not, it doesn't directly affect you, but I just want you to understand the new state law. There's now what's called a land use calendar. So previously, any planning board decisions would be appealed to the zoning board and then to the Superior Court. Now they skip that zoning board step. So this is intended to make development decisions more efficient so that you're not going from one local board, the zoning board, to another local board, the planning board and the zoning board, and then to Superior Court. You're skipping that middle step and you're going to a land use calendar. And at that land use calendar, as an appellant, we have to submit our briefs within about 90 days of filing the suit. And then there's a judge that's dedicated to that land use calendar that's making all the decisions. Now, in my experience over the last year, those decisions, he had a backlog of cases that could have been 10 years old. So he's going through those and getting those done. And I'm seeing decisions that are taking anywhere from about 9 months to a year at this point. I think that as time goes on, those land use decisions, those appeals will come out quicker and quicker as he kind of levels off and is only hearing like new matters, okay? Another item that was changed prior to these 2023 amendments is notice on all applications. So prior to these new state laws, oftentimes we would notify abutters, usually within 200 feet. We'd notify them by certified mail. Now, frankly, again, in my experience, a lot of people just don't pick up their certified mail, so now they don't even know what's going on. And then they'll come to meetings or they'll complain afterwards, we didn't get any notice, but they never picked up their certified mail. So the General Assembly thought it was best to require that all notice be mailed by regular mail with an affidavit from the applicant that says, listen, we mailed these to all of these people, same 200 feet, and they, you know, I would say 99% of the time, they get to the door. Now, whether they open the mail or not is another thing, but at least we know that the notice is getting to these individuals that are entitled to notice. Advertising is still in the local newspaper 14 days in advance of a public hearing. And again, we're talking about a zoning matter, a planning matter, or what's called unified development review, where the planning board would hear both zoning and planning items, but everything goes, gets printed in the newspaper 2 weeks prior. And then finally, a new item is that all of these public hearing notices have to be put on your municipal home page, so the website. Lots and lots of people are relying on and finding out information from municipal websites, so that's a great addition for residents to find out what's going on, at your zoning and planning boards, and town council. So like if you are hearing a zoning amendment, that's also gonna be on the homepage. So one of the big new changes is that the planning board is now hearing variances when applicants are already in front of them on a development application. So previously, again, this is all meant to be more efficient. So previously, if I was building a housing project right next door here, and it was being reviewed by the planning board, and let's say I needed a dimensional variance for a setback, because I couldn't meet the setbacks, the planning board would hear the first stage of a review, and then it would have to go to the zoning board for that dimensional variance, and then it would have to go back to the planning board. Now, the planning board keeps it and hears the variances as well. Variances, waivers, anything like that. So again, it's meant to be more efficient, so you're not bouncing from planning board to zoning board back to planning board. So that's called unified development review. So in all the sections of the zoning ordinance where that was required, we made those amendments to your zoning ordinance. So then in terms of variances and special use permits, for variances, these standards have changed. Again, all meant to be more efficient and actually more favorable to property owners, especially in the housing realm. Because I don't know if you kept up to date on this, but this was intended to be a package of pro-housing bills. So in terms of variances, the standards have changed. The new state law eliminates the requirement that a hardship does not result primarily from the desire to realize greater financial gain. So again, a lot of planning, zoning boards, generally zoning boards, when they hear that standard, they think, oh, you're gonna make money on that project? Well, that's primarily to realize greater financial gain. That was generally not the case. The standard was primarily to realize greater financial gain. In fact, 99% of the time, it was just to enjoy the permitted use. So the General Assembly said, you know what, we're not even gonna keep that standard because nobody really understands it. So that standard is out. It also eliminates the requirement of least relief necessary. So taking the example of the housing development next door, if that setback might not be the very least that's needed, then in theory, that dimensional variance could be denied. So the General Assembly said, you know what, as long as it's to enjoy a legally permitted use, you're pretty much entitled to some reasonable relief. So that least relief necessary has been removed. It also clarifies the requirement of more than a mere inconvenience. So again, for a variance, one of the standards was more than a mere inconvenience, but they added to that where the relief sought is minimal to a reasonable enjoyment of the permitted use to which the property is proposed to be devoted. Again, along the same lines, they want to make sure that permitted uses are allowed to be cited in appropriate places with variances that make sense, that are reasonable and appropriate. So that clarification was made by the General Assembly. And then for special use permits, and this is a big one, and this is something that is a matter of your discretion. You are voting on this. And we've worked with Jim and Josh on this specific area. Special use permits used to have this vague criteria, essentially saying that if it's not inimical to the public health, safety, and welfare, then it can be granted. Now the legislation says that specific and objective criteria have to be attached to each use that requires a special use permit. So I'm gonna switch, not from a housing development, but for fast food restaurant, for example. If you're going to require a special use permit for a fast food restaurant, some of the specific and objective criteria might be, how many queuing spaces on site does there need to be? You know, should it be 10 queuing spaces so that, you know, if it's a Dunkin' Donuts or a McDonald's, that people aren't waiting on Broad Street to get in? So that would be a specific and objective criteria. If you check the box and there are 10 spaces on the site plan, then they would meet that requirement. Another requirement might be, if you're adjacent to a residential use, you have to have a 20-foot buffer, and that would be to probably take care of some noise issues, perhaps some vegetation to screen between the two uses. So those are the kind of, just using those two as examples of specific and objective criteria, but you can no longer say, you know, if it's good for the community, whatever that means, then you can approve it, because frankly, all of them should be approved, because anybody, any expert, land use expert can get up and say, yeah, this isn't inimical to public health, safety, and welfare. So Jim and Josh went through the use table, and what I advise them to do, and I've advised this in other communities, is that, you know, obviously where something really should be permitted, like in a commercial zone, permitted. If it requires a special use because you want some of that buffering, or you want to address, you know, certain things that might help adjacent property owners, you know, another example is like outdoor storage. Maybe you want an opaque fence there, right? Instead of just looking at a sea of equipment or cars and things like that. Wherever you want to add requirements, not just the dimensional requirements for any old use, make it a special use permit. But if it's something pretty standard and you don't need additional dimensional requirements, make it permitted. And then, you know, if you don't know if you even want to do that, or you just haven't processed it enough, make it prohibited for now. And then when an application comes in, you can really go through it and say, what would we really like to see here for either specific and objective criteria to make it a special use permit, or perhaps you're changing dimensional requirements. I think Jim can speak more to the specific special use permit requirements that he is offering. But essentially, what we did is we wanted to make sure that permitted uses are still permitted and appropriate uses. And that, you know, we weren't just having these special use permits that really either should be prohibited or really need special use permit criteria. So that's what we did there. So substandard lots of record. This has changed a lot as well. So, you know, they had an application at the planning board last week for a minor subdivision. I'm going to describe it a little differently. 2 lots right next to each other that were divided previously, but now they're merged together. If those 2 lots were sitting there today, they're 4,000 square feet. The zoning ordinance requires them to be 5,000 square feet. A lot of communities will make you come for a dimensional variance simply to put a single family home there because you don't meet the lot area. The city can't do that anymore. No relief is necessary for lot area. So, and that makes sense because frankly, if you don't allow even a single family house on that lot, that's a taking, constitutional taking, where if they can't do anything with their property, you're taking away their property rights. So any use that's allowed, you do not need relief for lot area. In addition, for setbacks, frontage, and width, if it's a substandard lot, so take that same 4,000 square foot lot that really requires 5,000 square feet, the setbacks, the frontage, and the width are reduced proportionally. So in that case, that would be by 20% for all of those. So again, this is all to make things more efficient so that you don't have to come and ask for a variance for that setback. It's just automatic that if it's a substandard lot of record, you can, the building official, zoning official will have to reduce that setback requirement by the 20%. Same thing for building coverage, except that gets increased. So if, it's, you're allowed 10% of a building coverage requirement, I'm just making this up, then you add 20% to that because it's a 4,000 square foot lot, so they can't put the same house there as they would otherwise be able to put. So the General Assembly said, we'll let you put a bigger house there because you don't have as much land area. And then additional relief is permitted by administrative modification or variance, which I'm gonna get into in a minute. With regard to merger, so take those same two lots, 4,000 square feet, you have a merger provision that if you have two substandard lots of record right next door to each other and they're owned by the same person, they automatically merge, okay? What the state law now says is if the property's within 200 feet of the lot that you want to develop is either equal to or less than your property, i.e. 4,000 square feet, it does not merge anymore. And that lot would be able to be developed. Different communities are handling it differently, but essentially you have tax assessor's maps. If all of the lots within that 200 feet area are either equal to or less than that lot, it doesn't merge. Otherwise, they do still merge. So if the lots are all bigger, again, character of the neighborhood, right? You want to make sure that the neighborhood looks similar. So if they're all 4,000 square feet, why not have another one with 4,000 square feet? Let's see. Modification. So I just said that for substandard lots of record, you can ask for modifications or variances. And this is on any lot, it doesn't have to be substandard. So modifications are an administrative approval where you can ask for, it's like a variance, but it's called a modification because it's administrative in nature. If you need, let's say the setback is 10 feet and you require 9 feet. You can ask for an administrative modification from anywhere from nothing to up to 25% under state law. It's gotta be at least 15, but at most 25%. If it's under 5%, the zoning official can do it completely administratively. He has to make certain findings that essentially that very small adjustment works, and then he can issue the modification under 5 feet. If it's between, 5%. If it's between 5% and 15%, or in your case, I'm gonna say 20% because your planning staff and your planning board has recommended that you allow these modifications up to 20%. The zoning official makes the same determinations, and then he has to send out notice to adjacent property owners and publish it in the newspaper. If he receives an objection within a certain period of time, it becomes a variance and it goes to the zoning board or planning board, as the case may be, if there's a development involved. So that is one of the discretionary items. In fact, it's the only other discretionary item. Your planning staff and your planning board has recommended to you that modifications be up to 20% instead of just 15%. So that's an item that you can either accept or reject. And again, if anyone objects to that modification, it would go to the zoning board or the planning board in a development situation as a variance. Let's see. We're almost done. I don't want to lose you. It's a lot of technicalities. Finally, there's adaptive reuse. So this is a new permitted use under state law that allows that a change to a non-residential structure, so like a church, a school, a commercial, any kind of commercial industrial building, if it's proposed to be converted to at least 50% residential, so it can be mixed use, but it has to be at least 50% residential. That is a permitted use. Now, the city can still have it go through some, site design review so that there's appropriate landscaping and the drainage works, the stormwater management works, but it is a use that's allowed by right. So a lot of times you see this with mill conversions, and I know there's been several in Central Falls, wonderful mill conversions. This is to make that permitted by right. Again, more housing, right, which is what we need. So what the state law says is that parking can be limited, and you don't have, I don't know if you know this one, you don't have parking requirements in Central Falls. I think they're gonna revisit that maybe. That's up to you. But if you did have parking requirements, you could not require more than one space per dwelling unit as long as it's under 2 bedrooms. And then they're also saying that for 15 units an acre, you have to provide 20% low and moderate income housing. Now, there's another section that, I can work with the planning and zoning staff about, where it says if you don't have public water and sewer and you're not providing this LMI, low and moderate income housing, you just have to comply with minimum housing standards, whatever that means. I think that language has to be worked on a little bit because it's very vague and frankly, for communities, Central Falls has plenty of low and moderate income housing, but for, even Cumberland next door, basically what they're saying is, if I don't have public sewer and water and I'm not providing LMI, I can do whatever I want. So you get it.
Yes, that was one of my questions.
Yeah. So it's not great law. This stuff needs to continually be worked on. I actually am pretty heavily involved in a meeting with one of the assembly members and the woman from Housing Works who's going to provide the technical assistance and the training. Actually, I think it's tomorrow. So people are always talking about this stuff and what's working and what's not working. We still have more to do with the regulations, and that gets a little bit more specific on what types of developments trigger a minor land development project or a major land development project. Those things will all be addressed by the planning board. So I'm done with the general presentation. As I said, Mr. President, at the beginning, you do need to make a motion to accept what I'm calling version A, or your amended version that's in front of you tonight. And then I'm happy to answer any specific questions. Jim's here if he wants to add anything.
But the only question I have, a couple of things. First of all, there's a ton of stuff to absorb. Your work isn't done, so you're asking us basically to amend the work that has already been done. Is there many more changes so that we will be in compliance with the state?
So the zoning ordinance will be in compliance with the state law
If we approve,
if you approve this tonight.
okay, so this isn't like half the work.
No, this is it. We've been working on this for months and months. What I'm telling you though is that your development regulations, once we have a zoning ordinance, then the regulations come underneath those. We're working on those with Jim and Josh for the planning board to accept those changes. You will not need to be reviewing those. And then on a separate note, the city has engaged me to work on your comprehensive plan, which is old. So we've gotta start working on that. So we're trying to get those subdivision regulations done as quickly as possible, and then we're gonna move right into the comprehensive
So
plan.
what you just summarized, that's complete,
Yes,
we're in compliance.
yes.
My opinion, we have to trust your work and Jim's work. There's a lot to absorb there. In all honesty, I believe in you people, so I will be looking for a motion to, this is only the first reading, to accept the work you've already done, the amendments, the update, to comply with the state. Any questions?
Before we make that one, are we able to make amendments during the second reading?
Well, I would prefer that, because you need 2 votes
That's correct.
for approval, so that gets a little sticky. If you're not ready to vote on this, you can continue it to another meeting. And then you can vote and then vote at the next meeting. That would be my preference, rather than taking a first vote tonight.
I just wanna share sort of the reason why I asked that, right? One, I know that we had introduced this ordinance back, you mentioned that right at the beginning, right, I believe it was in October, so that we could be proactive. However, this is a completely different ordinance than what we first introduced at that time. We did receive the ordinance within the legal timeframe, but that was only Thursday. And it's 93 pages long. I understand that there are, you know, a lot of changes that we don't have control over because it's to comply with, you know, what the General Assembly has mandated. However, I think it is important for us to really understand what our ordinance says, because even though it's coming from the state, right, and we're complying, we still need to know what's in it, right, and what we're voting on, which your summary, I really appreciated that some of those questions or some of the things you touched on, I had questions about. And so I say that, I guess, trying to, and obviously it will depend on my colleagues here as well, but, like, to me, again, it's 93 pages, there's stuff that we still need to understand. I honestly have a lot of questions, and again, understanding that some of them come from the General Assembly, I'd still like to understand what we're putting in place.
And you should.
So for me, I would kindly request that we could continue it to next meeting so that, you know, maybe we could ask some questions tonight. I don't know how it works, so you tell me you're the lawyer, right? But like if we could ask some of those questions, and then sort of, you know, if there's any other questions, we could ask them at the next meeting. I don't know, I'm trying to figure out what the balance is and how to really go about this, because it's a big change.
Right. And no, I would, if you're not, I always say this, if you're not comfortable voting tonight, you shouldn't vote tonight. I can certainly be available in between if you, you know, one of you, several of
Let
you.
me ask you this, is there a state deadline to comply?
No, we're way past the deadline.
Past the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, so as I said at the beginning, Jim and Josh and the folks in zoning as well, we're complying with state law right now. What's really important is this special use permit stuff, because if you have special use permits that don't have specific and objective criteria, they're essentially permitted by right. So that's the, you know, that's the crisis, right? But I mean, it's been, some of these were adopted like last July, you know, I mean, so we're already past it. Is another couple weeks gonna hurt anything? I can't promise you that it won't, or will, but, so that's that. The other thing that I told Jim is, you know, this was a big project, so I've kind of put aside and committed to like 6 months of, if you see something that you don't like, or that, you know, we missed, which I don't think we did, but then I'm happy to redo, you know, and propose another amendment. What this doesn't do is it doesn't address all of the 2024 changes. We tried to include the things that were, we call low-hanging fruit, right? That didn't take a lot of time. But again, we're working with the city, we love working with the city. We're happy to make some more changes as needed. So, I don't know, that was a lot, but my point is, you don't have to vote tonight if you don't want to. I wouldn't put it off for a long time. I'm happy to give you my card if you wanna talk through a couple things. But yeah, that's what I have to say.
I'm gonna leave it at the pleasure of my council colleagues, whatever they wish. It was a lot to absorb tonight.
Yeah.
And I know, and that was only a summary.
Right.
But, so there is no, we passed the deadline.
Well, it's not really a deadline, it's just like what I explained to you, the thing that scares me the most is that you have special use permits out there that don't have any specific and objective criteria. And if there are uses that you don't like, you know, they're permitted by right, because there's no specific and objective criteria. You don't have to take a cough drop. So that's the only thing that.
Can you pull that section out? Pull that section out for approval tonight?
You could, you'd have to, you'd have to just say that we're only adopting that specific. I mean, again, I don't wanna encourage anything, but a couple of weeks, if that's what we're talking about, when do you meet again?
The 10th, February, it's literally 2 weeks.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's totally up to you. We can.
I would propose, and again, leaving it up to my colleagues, but I would propose continuing this till our regularly scheduled meeting on February 10th. For me personally, would love to chat more with you. If you could prepare me a card, that would be amazing. I do have a lot of questions, like a lot, and so, you know, I just think for me, it would be better to wait. It is 93 pages long, like I mentioned, and I think it's important for all of us to be familiar with what we are putting into law.
It's already been decided what the law is.
But not all of it, right?
But
Like
it's
there's
not
some
our
discretionary
decision to
stuff.
change it,
Oh,
we
that's
can't
correct.
change the law.
I agree.
I understand, but
For
we,
that, I
but
want
we
to
need
say
to
something
understand
before.
it.
Yeah, that is.
I
correct.
understand
Yeah,
what my colleague right now, my colleague Casarez is saying. This is the law, we need to follow that, we don't have too many things to change it. For me, we can have the, put to the next meeting in 2 weeks, but see, we can do it now, it's of my colleagues, but that's why my council member Kevin say, we don't have many things to change in the law.
That's an
But there
excellent.
are some discretionary things you mentioned.
So the two things that are discretionary, if I may,
Sure.
is the modification. So for modification, it has to be between 5 and 15%. But you can increase that to 25% modification. So in other words, if something requires 10 feet, like a setback, the 25% would be 2.5 feet that the modification could apply to. Jim and his team have recommended 20%. So it's not 15, which is the lowest that you have to provide. It's not 25, which is the highest you can provide. He has suggested 20% in the middle of those two. The only other thing that's really discretionary is the special use permit stuff. So what I had recommended to Jim from the beginning is pick out the things that make sense for special use permit criteria, like buffering, noise, parking, queuing, those kinds of things. Make those special use permits. Everything else, either make it permitted or make it prohibited for now, doesn't have to be prohibited forever. But if you're not prepared to do the special use criteria, then prohibit it for now. And then, you know, you're literally talking about a 6-week process for something to change by you in the zoning. Thank you. So,
Okay, we
That's-
can, I mean, I think they're correct. Kevin and Alberto, so therefore, we go ahead, approval of the first passage. Any questions that come up, we can do it in the second passage.
so this is what
That'll
I
give
was,
us time to
Right.
review before the final passage.
what I've done with budget hearings, because this comes up with budgets, we have to have 2 votes. Sometimes people want to make a change in the second vote. I say, okay, then you need to tack on another vote. So I guess that's what we have to,
But we always have 2 votes, first passage, second passage.
for any ordinance, yeah, that's,
Tonight is first
Mhm.
passage. So, but there's good balance, yes, there's 93 pages, I agree, there's a lot to absorb, but as Kevin and Alberto said, it's already law, and any changes we can make between now and
Yeah.
final passage.
and I do want to make sure you understand my offer, that if there should be changes, I'm happy to work with you.
We can't make any changes between, if we pass it today, we can't make any changes between now and the next one. She just mentioned that because we need 2 votes. So if we vote tonight and we make any changes, then we'll need 2 more votes after that.
But we can have a special meeting if you agree, but you have no time limit anyway. Seeing
You'd be
you-
tacking on another vote.
Yeah, exactly, we could do that.
But isn't it the same thing, waiting to be prepared and tacking on another vote at the back end? Like, couldn't we just wait the 2 weeks and then if we, you know, at that point, we would be more prepared, and then if we, rather than tacking on a third vote at the end to rush this through today.
We wouldn't be rushing it. It's probably gonna get.
Yeah, I don't think we'd be rushing it,
No,
through,
not
but
at
it's
all.
been, obviously, it's been very well prepared and designed by our team, who we have confidence in.
Yeah, that's.
And it's also based on the state law, which we have to abide by.
Okay,
So it's not like we're making this up on the cuff.
I understand, and I am in no way, what's the word? I don't know, trying to say that I don't have confidence in our team. Like, that's not sort of the spirit of what I'm saying. Again, I'm one vote, so it's really up to you all. I already put a motion on the table, there is no seconds, that's totally fine. I do have one question because it looks like something's missing in the wording for section 304, permitted uses, number 4. It says, notwithstanding any other provision of this ordinance, an accessory dwelling unit in A that complies with, so it looks like it's in A something that complies with 304.
We're in 5. Okay.
304, which.
Permitted uses, 4, it says notwithstanding any other provision of this ordinance, an accessory dwelling unit may be used in A that complies with law 45-24-31 and 45-24-73 shall be permitted.
I don't know why in
Strike
A,
I think
Yeah.
those are 2 extra words, I think, after the EDU.
it should say that
Should be-
complies with.
should be struck.
Okay.
Now, what I have said to Jim, because there are some formatting issues in here that just happen when you're using, you know, so you know that this whole thing is codified in your, what is it, Unicode? Do you have, or general code? So, when this goes to them, they may make formatting changes, and that's not really a formatting change, I would call that like a Scrivener's error. So things like that can be changed just without council approval. I don't know how that happened, but I put in a whole new section of permitted uses, because again, that was never in your ordinance, so this is not a 2023 change, except for the adaptive reuse part. This is a over time change, so you know how when you copy and paste?
I know, no, that's why I was like, is
Right.
something missing here, or
Right.
like, I don't know, so I was just
So,
trying to understand that part.
I get what everybody's saying, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I don't really have a position on whether you should approve or not, but I would say it seems like most of the council wants to approve. If in 2 weeks you see changes, then we just tack on another meeting. You know, because I'm seeing what's happening here, so I'm trying to say that you'll always have the opportunity to make changes that you need. And again, I'll give you my card, if you see something like that, we'll make the change. Because a lot of it could be just, this is a big document that we had to copy from somewhere else, so I take no offense to, you know.
The other question I had is, what does A stand for? So like, you know, in the tables where it shows like the zoning district, like yes, no,
A would be accessory.
okay, cause, that one was, it was, the yes, no special permit was defined, but I think the A I saw in the Conant, thread one, but I didn't see.
We didn't do a lot on Conant Thread, and I'll tell you why. Conant Thread is a joint
Yeah,
district, and I literally took, I can't remember who it was, whoever did this, the Pawtucket changes, he gave me the language, and again, I dropped it in, because that's a specialized district, that I thought, oh, let's take the opportunity to make it the same as Pawtucket, but it's not something I spent a lot of time on.
that's okay, I was part of the joint
Right,
planning
when we
commission
first-
in the
when we
past,
first
so I
created
it.
totally get that. It was just the A, I was like, wait, I know what yes, no special means, but A, I wasn't sure.
So A should mean accessory,
Okay.
and yeah, but that would mean that it can only be accessory in that district. whatever that use is.
Anyone else? First of all, anybody that loses their voice during a presentation deserves to have first pass. But Kevin's right, I mean,
I've been struggling with this for like 3 weeks,
yeah,
so.
Myrtle, you did your work, you get through first passage, any changes we can make. If we need a third meeting, we'll go to a third meeting.
Yeah, we're happy, and I'm happy to talk to people cause I haven't looked at my calendar. I don't know what my schedule is on the 10th, but I'm happy to talk to any of you from now until then, because we wanna get this right. And there's always, we're not going anywhere. So
I
it is-
think you did your due diligence. Me personally, I've seen it over the years. This state and every state, too many regulations, they over-regulate too many things and it confuses it. We can study this for 20 years and it's never gonna be perfect.
Most of these ordinances, they all look, I said this to the planning board, they all look the same. I don't care if you're in Cumberland,
Yes.
or here, or Johnston, they all have the same antiquated uses, but I mean, you'd need a whole, like, way more than what we did.
So, a couple of things if I can just add. As Kelly mentioned, the descriptions that she went through were primarily things that there's really absolutely no discretion. I completely understand and respect the interest in wanting to understand those either way, so any further explanations, either of us would be more than happy to discuss. With
Yeah,
respect
just so it's fully captured in our AV, can you speak into the microphone?
Sure.
Our recording?
With respect to any of the discretionary changes, the primary section that we referred to was the use table where there are special use permits. I could either now, or depending on how the council chooses to move forward, refer to the specific changes that were made within that table, and then there's a section of definitions for each of the permitted special uses. As was mentioned, there has to be a set of clear objectives, and those are laid out in a section of the ordinance as well. So they are there, whether it be this evening or between now and the next meeting, we'd be more than happy to provide any further explanation of any of those things. And I just wanted to confirm for procedurally, depending on what happens tonight, if there are changes.
They'd have to tack on another meeting, I think. I mean, you can ask Matt.
And the other point on that is, again, referencing a point that Kelly made, there are some 2024 legislative changes that we are working to get in. So we will be coming before the council again within the next few weeks to get all of those caught up as well. So if there are things that are approved, whether it be this evening, at the next meeting, however the council chooses to do that, we have an opportunity again within the next few weeks to capture these things. You know, there's also a possibility we go through it, we'll realize that something else needs to be changed that we didn't. And since there are notice requirements, we have to notice 3 weeks prior to each meeting when a zoning ordinance is amended. We've met that. If there are further changes, changes that would be discussed tonight. So
Yeah, as long as you continue to a date certain, you're all set.
So if that is continued to the next meeting, if that's
Yeah.
decided, then we have met those
Mhm.
notice requirements.
Yeah.
So be prepared to move forward with that.
So with that, what is your pleasure? I think we should go for a passage after all this. And if we need a third meeting, we'll go to a third meeting. And I know you did your due diligence, and I'm sure we will be compliant when your people have done their work. Thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry you lost your voice.
No, but it's been a couple of weeks.
If I may, I have one more question, which is what is, if it's, on page 16, it's like the table with the, the zoning districts, the uses, and then the yes, no, etc. Number 48.2, on C-2, it says SN, so is it S or is it N or is it both? And what does that mean?
Did you say page?
Page 16, sorry. It's like, let's see, it's the,
Yeah. That,
you see it?
I
There should be a
do,
cross
and that
out.
should have had a strike through, so this is another one of those
Okay.
types of.
So would it be a no or
It would be a no.
I don't-
It's no across the board.
Okay.
Anyone else? And with that, looking for approval for, first passage of the, zoning ordinance.
Council President, I'll make a motion to approve the first passage.
Motion by
Second.
Second by Alberto. Roll call vote.
Councilperson Diana?
No.
Councilperson Kazarian?
Yes.
Councilperson Tejero?
Yes.
Councilperson Rivas Lugo?
Yes.
Councilperson Lozaro Martinez?
Yes.
Council President Ferry?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. 5-1.
With that, looking for a motion to adjourn. And we stand adjourned
Yes.
It looks like you should have done it. Well, I'm gonna tell you.